Introduction to the Elements of Music, Texture. So welcome. We are going to find out in this video what are the 8 elements of music. I'll give a brief explanation of each of those 8 elements of music, and then I'll give a further in-depth explanation of what is texture in music. The 8 elements of music are, in alphabetical order, dynamics, form, or you might call it structure, harmony, melody, rhythm, texture, timbre, and tonality. Each of the elements of music are like an ingredient in a recipe. Just like a recipe needs a little bit of some ingredients and a lot more of others, they all contribute to the overall flavour of the dish. The combination and amount of an ingredient is like the chef adding their personal flair and spice to a dish. So too, a musician and composer uses the elements of music to flavour their musical dish to suit their taste and personal style. So a brief explanation of each of the 8 elements of music is: dynamics simply refers to how loud or soft the music is. Form or structure is the order and arrangement of the parts of the music. Harmony is the instruments that support the melody with chords. Melody is a series of pitches that makes a tune. Rhythm refers to how long or short a sound is. Texture refers to the layers of sound or how sparse or dense the music is. Timbre is the unique sound quality of an instrument or sound. And tonality is the overall sound of the music as pleasant or unpleasant. So let's look at texture. What is texture in music? Texture in music and what it means in music is quite different to what most people think texture means in everyday life. When you think of the texture of something, most often you will think of how a surface feels. Is it rough? Is it smooth? Or maybe cold, wet, dusty, or even metallic? But these words are not what we use to describe what is texture in music. So what does texture in music mean? Texture in music refers to the number of musical lines and their density in a piece of music. In other words, texture in music is the relationship between the layers of sound or lines or voices. Some people will use the term layers of sound interchangeably with texture. Texture in music can be described using several terms, but the simplest ones are in describing the density of the music. The density or the texture in the music, in a piece of music with only a few instruments playing, could be described as light, thin, or even sparse. The density of a large group of instruments playing could be heavy, dense, thick, or even compact. Some texture will depend on the number of the instruments playing at any given time, as well as how those instruments are being performed. When you are discussing, performing, or studying what is texture in music, there are a few main points to consider. These come under the broader headings of identify the instruments, density, what type of phony is being used, and lastly, to use a diagram to demonstrate what is the texture and structure of the music. So here you can see the mind map. We've got texture in music, so we're looking at the density. So the density is referring to the number of layers in the music, described as thin, sparse, thick, or dense. Instruments. Identify the instruments in each section of the music. Phony is the type of phony, which is monophonic, homophonic, polyphonic, or heterophonic. And a diagram is simply a graphic representation of the music. So identify the instruments. When you are trying to work out the texture of a piece of music, one of the first things you will need to do is list the instruments performing in the music. There are a few ways to do this. You could listen for each instrument, you could watch a live performance of the music, or you could look at the musical score. Once you have listed the instruments, it will be easier to work out the overall texture if you work out the overall structure being used first. Then, try and list the instruments performing in each section. With your sections written down, it should be a less complicated process to discuss the role, range, and register of each instrument in the music. Sorry, I will get my words out. Knowing what each instrument is doing in each section will also help you to determine other aspects of what is texture in the music you are studying. Role of an instrument. There are 4 main roles that an instrument can perform in any section of a piece of music. Please note that not every piece of music will have an instrument in each of these roles. Melody. This is defined as a series of pitches that form a tune. The melody or main melody is the part that is most memorable and is often the part that you sing along to in the music. Beat. An instrument that performs the beat is often a drum or percussion instrument. The beat is defined as performing the underlying pulse of the music and helps the listener to hear the tempo of the music. Melodic accompaniment. The melodic accompaniment is performed by any pitched instrument that is not performing the melody but plays along and supports the melody. For example, if there was someone singing and a guitar strumming the chords, then the guitar would be the melodic accompaniment and the melody would be sung by the vocalist. Rhythmic accompaniment. These are any instrument that performs with and supports the beat. These could be like a tambourine or shaker that plays a rhythmic pattern to accompany the drum kit that is playing the beat. The bass guitar or double bass, or even string bass, are also often part of the rhythm section or rhythmic accompaniment. Even though the bass plays pitched notes, they are often in time and playing on the beat with the drum kit. Describing the density. Now this is the most important part of any bit of texture, but you need to understand how many instruments are performing because they contribute to the density. The density of the music will depend on three main factors. The first being what instruments are performing. Secondly, what type of ensemble is performing the music. And lastly, how are the instruments performing in each section? When discussing what is texture in music, it will help if you can work out first what is the structure of the music. Knowing the different sections will help you later figure out what is happening with the texture in each section. Once you know the musical structure, you can then start to work out what is the texture. When you are listening or looking at a musical score, determine what instruments are performing in the music, then what instruments perform it, and then actually what are they performing in each section. It also helps to know what types of ensemble is performing the music. If, for example, it is an orchestra, then the overall texture and density would be vastly different to the texture of a duet. Is it a choir, or rock band, or a jazz big band performing? Knowing the answer to this question will help you to be able to describe the density of the music. And you can see in this diagram that the triangle gets thicker and wider at the base, and this is to represent the density. So a duet has quite a thin or light density, whereas the more instruments you add, the thicker it gets. And obviously if you have even more instruments playing, then it's going to get even thicker. After you have all the information you need about the layers of sound in the music, it will be easier to describe the density of each section or the texture of the overall music. There are several adjectives that you can use to describe the density of the music. These include light, airy, open, thin, medium, thick, dense, heavy, closed, wide, spacious, tight, and close. Feel free to add to this list because this is not an exhaustive list, but this is a good start. The density of the music will not only depend on how many instruments are performing in any given section, but on how those instruments are performing. The other elements of music and how they are used in the music will contribute to the differences in texture. For example, you can have two quartets playing the same music, but each could have a hugely different density or thickness in sound. If, for example, there was a string quartet performing the same music as a rock quartet, the music could sound quite different simply because of the type of instruments performing as well as the way those instruments are played. In the two samples below, so you can see those two links there, or there'll be a link in the description, on the song Scar Tissue, the texture is essentially the same in the number of layers performing, but they sound different to each other. The original by Red Hot Chili Peppers has a heavier sounding density because of the bass guitar and drum kit, whereas the string quartet version by Vitamin String Quartet has a much lighter sounding texture. Types of texture. Before you read any further, please note that phony is not a real word. It is just a term used to help group the different texture definitions used to describe the type of texture in a piece of music. Below and on the following pages is a list of music terms and definitions for texture. Monophonic is a single unaccompanied melodic line. And you can see in the diagram here that that wiggly line is meant to represent the melody. Homophonic is melody with accompaniment. And again, in that diagram, you can see the melody as the wiggly line, and there are two other lines that are the accompaniment there. Polyphonic is more than one melody performed at the same time. So again, you can see the melody there, and there's two other lines that have lots of things happening. That is meant to represent 3 melodic lines in this particular little diagram. And heterophonic are 2 melodies that follow each other, but with more ornamentation in the main melody. So you can see there that essentially those melodies are exactly the same sort of contour shape, but the heterophonic one, the line that has the more wiggly bits on it, is meant to represent the ornamentation. To help you better understand and make sense of these terms and definitions for texture, consider the following descriptions of the different versions of the popular children's song, Frères Jacques. If there was a group of people singing the song together in unison with no other accompanying instruments, then the texture of the music would be monophonic, simply because there's nothing else accompaniment. So if you are singing Happy Birthday, for example, that is sung monophonic, unless you've got some really clever musical people around you who start adding harmonies. But if you are singing together in unison, that is monophonic. Now, if the same song was sung by several people, and there was someone strumming along with the guitar, or maybe the ukulele, playing a chordal accompaniment, then the texture would be now homophonic, because it is a melody with accompaniment. Now, to make the same song polyphonic, the song could be sung in several voices, all starting the song at a different time and singing the song in a round. There'll be more of a definition of a round later, but I'm sure you've already all heard what we mean. So the song starts as Frères Jacques, dormez-vous, and as soon as that the first line is finished, that Frères Jacques, the next one comes in at that point, starting the song. Okay, and then the next one comes in. So you can have as many lines or melodies happening at the same time. To change the texture into heterophonic would mean, for example, several voices singing the song, a guitar strumming away, which you don't have to have, but you can, and a solo voice singing the melody with lots of fancy vocal flourishes and embellishments over the top of the simply sung melody by the group. So you often see this in pop songs. So the backing vocalist might be singing the actual melody, and the lead singer, what they are doing is adding all these extra bits over the top of the melody, and that means it's heterophonic because they're adding more embellishments. There are a few other important musical terms and definitions that you should know to help you deepen your understanding of what is texture in music. So a round or a canon is the same melody that starts at different points by another voice or instrument, which I just described before about Frères Jacques. There's lots and lots of rounds and canons out there. I'm sure you would have sung some as a child. A fugue is a piece of polyphonic music where each line has a turn at the main theme. Then it returns back to accompany the main theme. So below you can see that link there is a good example of the fugue in G minor by Bach. Now this particular little video, it's actually a nice graphic representation because you can see the actual main theme coming back by the colour that's being used. Okay. Unison is the same melody performed by several voices or instruments at the same time, at the same pitch, which is what we were just talking about there with singing maybe Happy Birthday or Frères Jacques, or everybody singing maybe a club song for a team sport song. It's usually that's being sung in unison. Doubling is the same melody either performed by 2 different instruments in unison or 2 similar instruments an octave apart. Okay, so if you were going to double and you had, say, a violin and a cello, and they're performing exactly the same melody, it just happens to be that the cello is performing it 2 octaves below the actual or the violin, or an octave below, then that's what it means by doubling, okay? Or if it's male and female singing voices together, you can see that then it's doubling that way. Another way to discuss the different layers of sound, or how each musical line contributes to what is texture in the music, is to know what direction each line is going. Below are some texture terms and definitions to help you. So similar motion means 2 melodic lines with the same melodic contour. Parallel motion is 2 melodic lines with the same melodic contour. So parallel and similar motion are virtually the same thing, okay? So it's a bit like doubling. They're really the same thing. It's 2 or more melodic lines going in the same direction, okay? They're following the same contour. Contrary motion, however, is 2 melodic lines that move in opposite directions. So if you are a piano player and you are doing your scales, and you have got both hands starting on a C, and you move towards the middle and end up on a C together, and then go back out. So one hand's going ascending the scale and one hand is descending the scale, that is contrary motion. Counterpoint is a type of polyphonic music where each line has its own melody and moves independently of the other instruments or voices. Below is a counterpoint mashup of Queen and Stevie Wonder. The two songs combined are Another One Bites the Dust and Superstition. So it's a really good example of what is counterpoint because there's a couple of melodies happening at the same time over the top of each other. Yeah, and it's quite, you can hear bits of each song coming through, but it's the same song underneath. It's very clever. Whoever did it was very clever. Okay, and there's some examples there. So you can see similar motion and parallel motion. They're the same thing. It just means that, you know, it essentially means a difference between the instruments and all that sort of stuff. It's the same, okay? Contrary motion, you can see they go in opposite directions. And counterpoint is a type of polyphony, as I said, where each line is actually quite independent of each other. It was used a lot in Baroque music. So a texture diagram. So this is a really important skill to have if you can do this. So there are many ways to write and notate music. One way to represent the texture of a piece of music is to use a texture chart that uses a diagram that's like a graph in mathematics. To create a texture diagram or texture chart, first work out the instruments performing, then determine the different sections of the music. Once you have these two things worked out, create a graph with the instruments listed up one side of the graph and the different sections of the music along the bottom. Lastly, after you have worked out what instruments are playing in each section, add this information to your texture chart. Look at the example below to help you create your own for the music you are studying. So in this particular example, you can see that along the bottom you've got an introduction, a verse, chorus, verse 2, and then another chorus. But the instruments that are performing are drums, bass guitar, lead guitar, rhythm acoustic guitar, backing vocals, lead female vocals, and lead male vocals. Okay, so those little yellow patches are there just to help you see the different lines, okay? So you don't have to have those, it's just there to help you see the lines here on the screen. So you can see in this particular sample that the drums are performing all the way through. They don't stop, okay? But the bass guitar doesn't come in until the verse. And the rhythm acoustic guitar starts in the introduction with the actual drums and it continues all the way through. The backing vocals, well, they only happen in the chorus. You can see there in the chorus section. Whereas the lead female and lead male vocals, the lead female starts the verse, the lead male ends the verse, but they sing the chorus together along with the backing vocals. And again, it happens again in the second verse. The lead female starts it, the lead male vocal ends it, and then they sing together in the chorus. Now, the dotted line of the electric guitar is meant to represent that it's not playing all the way through. It's sort of playing this little riff that happens all the way through the music. Okay? So why is texture important? Texture is an especially important element of music. The way a piece of music uses each of the elements of music contributes to the overall texture of the music. If the music, for example, has lots of voices singing close harmonies, then the texture could be described as tight. Think of the Andrews Sisters and Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Okay, they're very close harmonies. Barbershop quartets use close harmonies. On the other hand, if the melody is sung by more than one voice and is supported with a large ensemble, then the density and the texture of the music could be quite thick and rich. In contrast, if the music has lots of distorted timbres from a heavy distorted rhythm guitar and another electric guitar performing with a crunchier timbre, then these are accompanied by a drum beat that has the drummer using a double kick, so there's something on the beat or even more, like it's doubling the beat. The bass player performing a very rhythmic bass riff, then the overall texture could be described as dense and heavy. This would be because there is a lot going on all the time. The sound and timbre of each instrument contributing to the overall density and heaviness of the music. Music appreciation and texture. The elements of music do not work in isolation. Each of the 8 elements of music works with the others to make each piece of music unique and different. The texture of any piece of music depends on the other elements of music and how they are used. The number of instruments performing, the structure of the music, the techniques used to make a sound on the instrument, the tonality and the harmony used to accompany and support the melody, the dynamics used in each section, as well as the rhythms used in combination with each instrument, all combine to create what is the texture in the music. Next time you are listening to a piece of music, try and listen for the number of instruments and what roles they are performing. Then ask yourself, what is the overall density of the music? What is the type of texture being used? Does the density of the type or type of texture change between sections? How does the way the other elements of music are used contribute to the texture of the music? Try to map the texture of the music and see if it helps you understand the changes in texture in the music. As a musician, think about ways that you can use the elements of music texture to improve your next performance. Can you alter the feel of the texture by playing in a different way? Can the texture be changed by adding or taking away an instrument? Maybe you could change the textural density by simply changing the dynamics from loud to soft or vice versa. Remember that the elements of music are like ingredients in a recipe. Sometimes it is a good thing to try something new. You never know, you might like the flavour. If you'd like a free set of the Elements of Music listening question cards to begin your music appreciation journey, use the link you can see here, or use the link in the description below. You might even want to check out what resources are ready for you to purchase and download today in my store, Julia Teaching Resources. Use the link in the description below to browse over 500 music class products today. Thanks for watching. You can find classroom-ready resources ready to use in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. Simply just Google Julia Teaching Resources and you will find it in the Teachers Pay Teachers store. Or you can click the link in the description below to find my store, Julia Teaching Resources. Until next time, happy listening.